Okay, we are officially recording, and thank you all so much for joining. Um, my name is Dr. Lauren Snedeker. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Good afternoon. Thank you again for joining us today. Today is our first day in recognition of Careers in Aging Week. Careers in Aging Week is a campaign created by the Gerontological Society of America, otherwise known as GSA, that is focused on bringing awareness and excitement around careers in aging. Again, my name is Dr. Lauren Snedeker. I'm a faculty member at the School of Social Work and coordinator for the MSW Certificate in Aging and Health at the School of Social Work. I am joined by great colleagues and friends that I'm just going to go ahead and introduce and invite them to wave as their names are shared. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Emily Baylog, who is, and thank you, Emily, Dr. Baylog, who's an assistant professor in the occupational therapy doctorate program. Dr. Baylog has practiced occupational therapy for 15 years, primarily working in geriatric rehabilitation, home modification, and aging in place. She received both a BS and MS in occupational therapy from Thomas Jefferson University in Philly, followed by a PhD in translational health science at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Dr. Baylog is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and served in the New Jersey Air National Guard from 2002 to 2008, specializing in emergency management, disaster preparedness, and earned her AS, which I'll have to explain what that is, from the community college, of the Air Force, where her technical specialty was in nuclear, biological, chemical, radiological warfare preparedness and defense. That's a mouthful. Her research focuses on creating age-friendly communities where older adults are empowered to participate. And she is presently co-founder of a startup tech company called UseLink, where older adults can use technology to promote and maintain independence. Thank you, Dr. Baylog.
Thank you so much.
Yes, welcome. I'll also introduce Dr. Tracy Davis. If you could give a wave. Thanks, Dr. Davis. Associate Professor at the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies at the School of Health Professions. Dr. Davis has 2 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree from the University of South Florida and a doctoral degree from the University of Kentucky. She holds a certificate in applied statistics from the University of Kentucky as well. Dr. Davis joined Rutgers University in the fall of 2013. She is a full-time faculty member in the Interdisciplinary Studies Department in the School of Health Professions, where she is the gerontology track coordinator for the aging track in the undergrad and grad degree programs. And in addition to teaching, Dr. Davis is involved in numerous research projects. The majority of her research focuses on HIV prevention among older adults and incorporating aging education into the high school curriculum. Thank you, Dr. Davis. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Alyssa Kozlov, instructor. Thank you, Alyssa, Dr. Kozlov, Rutgers School of Public Health, Health Behavior, Society, and Policy and Population Aging. Dr. Kozlov received her PhD in psychology from Washington University in St. Louis with dual focuses in clinical psych, aging, and developmental psychology. After graduate school, she completed an internship in geropsych at the Palo Alto Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Palo Alto, California. One area focusing of her research is on improving psychological outcomes for older adults with serious illness, as well as adults. And Dr. Kozlov's other area of research focuses on how to increase overall access to, awareness of, and knowledge about palliative care. Part of this research includes the development, Dr. Kozlov developed the Palliative Care Knowledge Scale, which is a brief scale designed to assess layperson knowledge about palliative care. So thank you so much, Dr. Kozlov, for joining us as well and all on the line. I'd like to, being mindful of our time, start our panel discussion. Our first event, part of the series for Careers in Aging Week, begins with why aging? Why consider a career in aging? And so that is our first question for each one of the panelists. And we're informal, so please go ahead, panelists, and dive into that question. No order. Again, why did you consider a career in aging?
I'm happy to start. So back when I was applying for graduate school, it's this wild experience where I was 23 years old and I had to declare what I wanted to study and specialize in for the next 5 years, at least in graduate school, but in theory, indefinitely. And the only thing that I could wrap my head around of like being something that I thought I could think about indefinitely was how to make the lives of older adults better. Aging is something that is not pathology, right? I had worked in eating disorder labs. I had worked in a lab studying folks with schizophrenia. Those are illnesses that a small percentage of the population gets, and it's horrible, and there's a lot of suffering, and it's not to downplay mental health problems like that, but the goal of life is to get really, really, really old. Everyone is aspiring to age. We're all aging every day. And I watched my own grandparents struggle with older age. I watched my parents tell me things like, kill me before I get old, never put me in a nursing home. And it just struck me that for something that is expected and normal and quite frankly, the goal, we sure are afraid of it, and we're sure not doing it right in this country. So it was the only thing I could thinking about for the rest of my life. And what am I, like 20 years in? Not 20 years in. Well, I started in undergrad, so maybe I'm 20 years in from when I first started thinking about older adults. And I'm not bored. There's new challenges. There's new ways to think about it. There's so many different facets of what it means to work with older adults that for me, it was an obvious choice that I would never tire. We were never going to solve this problem, right? Like there's so many different components here. And I was never going to get bored thinking about how to make the lives of older adults better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I open it up to the rest of our panelists. I couldn't agree more. And one of my favorite things to say always is that we're all aging every second of every minute of every day. So that's always like a fun reminder to the rest of our panelists.
I'll jump in since I'm off mute. So my story is a little maybe unusual. I knew from the time that I was 12 years old that I was going to be an occupational therapist because my best friend's mother was an occupational therapist. And so she was highly influential in my life. So I knew, and I really liked the philosophy as a child of helping people to be independent or interdependent. And so when I was 14, I was working in a coffee shop, in a little local coffee shop in town, and the majority of the patrons there were older adults. And I especially admired one person in particular. His name was Paul. He was a World War II veteran, and he struggled with some issues with dialysis, where he couldn't have a full cup of coffee, things like that. He also struggled to get in and out of the coffee shop. And so when I would see him pull up, I would jump over the counter and go get him and walk him in. And we both just kind of got a kick out of that. We really bonded over that. I didn't learn until much later how much that meant to him and his family, to have him be able to be independent or interdependent, and being able to really participate in his community, because this coffee shop had like a little counter, and so it was a really social place for people. They would sit there for hours. It wasn't sort of a come in, not like Dunkin' where you go and grab your coffee and go. People were really sitting and socializing and enjoying one another, and so that really kind of sparked my interest. And I knew that once I did go on to pursue occupational therapy school, that I would specialize in older adults.
Well, I can add in my experience. So I first became aware of gerontology as a field of study in undergrad. I think I was maybe a sophomore, trying to finish my general education requirements, and with limited course options, my advisor suggested introduction to gerontology, and I was like, what the heck is that? But I was really gung-ho about finishing up those requirements and moving on, so I took the course, and and that's where it all began. So I loved it. I had a wonderful instructor who really inspired me. So after that semester, I added gerontology as a second major along with psychology, and have been following that path ever since. I will say, from an early age, I've always had, wonderful connections with my grandparents, spent a lot of time with them. And even more recently, my parents have found like papers from middle school where I was writing about Alzheimer's and things like that. So I think it's been something, within me since then. I just didn't really know that gerontology was a field until I was in undergrad. And so that's where it all started. So I probably should have gone back and given credit to my advisor for sparking that interest in me, because I certainly was reluctant at first, but I loved everything about gerontology and my career, and I'm really happy that I did this.
Yes, thank you all so much. And then, in the spirit of sharing, I had just very similar experiences in my own career. Always wanted to work in health, never really specific, but then thinking, actually it was my first internship at my MSW program, which I went to NYU, and it was a senior center in Midtown. And it was just a group of eclectic, amazing people with amazing lives. And I really learned from them, from this group of older community members in, kind of like Murray Hill and Manhattan, about their aging experience. And then when I brought it back into my program and realized the lack of, curriculum or lack of faculty focused on aging at the time, I just it was like gospel. I think we all can agree. It's sort of like gospel. You just kind of find it and want to hold on to it. And that just becomes your passion and your drive. So it's really great to hear. I always love hearing these stories. So thank you so much, panelists. I want to move on to our second question. What do you enjoy most about working in your field? Because for those joining us, we all are actually in different fields. We're all interdisciplinary, but also can be found working together quite often, outside of academia. And the question that I wanted to ask is, again, what do you enjoy most about working in your field with older adult clients?
So I can start off. I think in my field, so I'm in health sciences, but my main interaction with older adults is with them as research participants. I'm not a clinician, so I don't do any kind of clinical work with them, but I do spend a lot of time with older adults when I'm doing research. And I feel like it's always more of a give and take. So, I might be surveying them or interviewing them, but they give me so much in return through their stories and their advice and things like that. And so that's what I enjoy. I just enjoy sitting there with them and learning about them, how they grew up, and that kind of thing. And then they also help me to formulate better research questions and help me in that fashion as well. So it's wonderful. I really enjoy it. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I have sort of a similar sort of feeling as you, Tracy. Those historical kind of perspectives that older adults bring, and that they apply to, times from the past, and they're applying it to even my own life experiences in that moment when we sort of talk together. So I'm an occupational therapist. So for those of you who don't know what occupational therapy is, we help people to maximize their health, their well-being, and their quality of life, whether it's an individual person, communities, groups, populations, so that in my experience, older adults can participate in any way that they find meaningful. And so because we are such a collaborative field, I really learn a lot from my clients and how they sort of adapt things in their lives and their environment, certain tools that they use. So I show them ideas, they show me ideas. And I think this sort of collaborative experience is a unique philosophy within occupational therapy. So things like, being able to make a meal or care for yourself and your own personal hygiene, to be able to go out into the community and socialize or grocery shop, those kinds of things, working collaboratively together to really come up with solutions is just such a wonderful experience. And really the genuine delight to see older adults knowing that we or I value that they are an expert in themselves and their conditions and those sorts of things is really special.
I guess it's my turn. It's hard to narrow it down. I'm going to flip it a little bit because Dr. Davis and Dr. Baylog talked about the patient experience, but I also want to put a plug out to like how wonderful the professional network of people who choose to work with older adults is. Working with older adults clinically is incredibly interdisciplinary. And so you are always finding really incredible colleagues to collaborate with. I go to a couple of different geriatric focused conferences for my research work, and it's just like the warmest, friendliest, kindest people. People don't choose geriatrics because it's where the big bucks are, at least in like clinical care. I do think actually there are big bucks to be made in like nursing home administration or innovation or entrepreneurial, but like a geriatrician, like looking at medicine, for example, geriatricians make a lot less money than say like cardiac surgeons or neurosurgeons or anesthesiologists. So like the folks who are choosing to go and work with older adults are choosing it for a different reason. And that reason is like a passion for service and helping, and it's just a contagious environment. Working with people who work with older adults and being one myself, I have to say it's just, you couldn't ask for lovelier colleagues.
I couldn't agree more. I think about the folks that I collaborate with in private practice, and I just so much value and enjoy speaking with professionals in the field about our clients and about sort of like the more, like if we zoom out a little bit, the more macro level influences that shape our aging experience and the way that we think about aging and growing older. And I feel like we're doing the hands-on work with our older clients, and we're showing them value and validation and support during this other chapter of life. But I also think when we make this commitment to working with older adults, we're also sort of a part of like a bigger social justice movement that, we're embracing aging, we're aging all the time, and we should be shifting the narratives about the aging experience, like reframing aging, thinking about all of the different kind of ways that we talk about getting older, and really focusing on anti-oppressive approaches to this part of life. So thank you all so much. This is so exciting and wonderful to hear everyone's perspectives. And I think this next question that I have for the panelists is particularly important, especially for the students in the room and the students who could be watching later. So what opportunities do you all see for the future with respect to working with older adult clients? And this could be like professional opportunities, or again, like more sort of mission related opportunities. So I'll leave it there.
I'll start with this one. So I like to think about the World Health Organization's global strategy for this decade. And so they have, I believe it's 4 points. So addressing social determinants of health, which is essentially looking at the social environment and how that impacts someone's health. Curbing ageism and misconceptions about aging, developing person-centered innovations related to chronic diseases and conditions, which is highly prevalent as we begin to age or as we're aging, and then embracing aging-friendly communities. So I like to think about, each one of those areas. And for me in particular, as an occupational therapist, looking at that age-friendly communities is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I think there's a lot of opportunity for occupational therapists to go out into the community, to develop programming, to to provide home modifications that will, and community modifications that will enable older adults to be able to interact, to be able to stay at home. I mean, that's really what aging in place means, is the ability to remain in your home and community as independently as possible, regardless of your age, income, or ability level. And so I think, thinking about that, there's a real opportunity, not just for occupational therapy, but considering that's my field, especially, working in government or working in a senior center, or, going directly to people's homes and helping them to access the community and access their home, and really minimizing barriers. So for me, really looking at the community and aging in place is a real opportunity, in addition to those other global strategies from the World Health Organization.
So I think, yeah, definitely the aging in place and age-friendly communities. I mean, definitely a lot of opportunities there. I really think anything and everything is possible. I think a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities are going to become available to meet the unmet needs of the aging population, particularly with the baby boomers. They're a different generation, and I think they're going to have a lot of different needs. I mean, they're already, turning 65, but I think they're going to change the way we operate and how we, attack the challenges that they might have. For myself, coming from health sciences, I teach a lot of the allied health professionals and those in healthcare management. And so, I mean, the need is tremendous already. And so I think we can only count on that increasing, all sorts of health professionals, nursing, respiratory therapists, allied health professionals, all kinds. So I really think the door is wide open, and there's going to be so much opportunity, and I don't think you'll be without work at any point. So I feel like it's a great field to jump into now.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think Tracy said it best. Everything is an opportunity in aging. The demographics of our country, of our world, are graying. So wherever there is anything that it's all opportunity now, in business, in architecture, in law, in healthcare, in banking, and anywhere, marketing, everything is an opportunity if you think about it through an aging world, because historically we don't center anything around our older population. And so bringing that lens to whatever industry you may find yourself in is going to be an opportunity, because the market is there. It's the largest growing population demographic. So it's all an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to tie in everything, Alyssa, about all of the different opportunities, and really considering how whatever industry or work that you are preparing to do or interested in doing or already doing, how it meets and responds to the needs of someone who might be older than maybe your target population, or how it can fit in with aging, and does this service make sense for someone across the lifespan, or how are we going to shift to be responsive to folks who are in need, who are maybe reaching out to us, who are older. And in fact, one of my favorite stories to share from the social work world is just how actually I had a student that I was working with, worked at a nonprofit, local, kind of around the Newark campus at our school. And during the pandemic, they do not have, a senior older adult program as part of this nonprofit, but they work with a lot of other age groups, after school stuff and things like that. And they happen to start getting a lot of calls from older residents in sort of subsidized housing units near their nonprofit. And this student developed a older adult focused program, really did a needs assessment and took stock of what these individuals in the community were interested in, how the agency could provide those resources. It really started from the ground up. And so it was just an example of, again, thinking about your industry, where you are, and how it could be more inclusive right? We talk about inclusivity a lot here at the school, as well as, in our other professional lives and personal lives. And so, thinking about how we could be more inclusive to this subpopulation, if you will, which, as Alyssa mentioned, is actually the largest sector of our population that is growing. It's the biggest. There are more older adults, folks over the age of 65, than there are children, I think, at this point, or at least like nearing, 2034 or something like that. I'm sure the rest of my colleagues know that statistic, off the, yeah, 2030. There you go, Dr. Baylog. Yeah, exactly. So we all know that this is happening, and it's just sort of time, to consider ways that we can be more inclusive. And that's actually a perfect segue to our next question, which is geared towards ageism. And I want to invite any of the panelists to jump in and think through the question and answer sort of related to any consequences maybe that they've observed or that they know that exist in their respective fields as a result of ageism.
I think a lot of times people assume, so I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I think a lot of times people assume that older adults are not interested in psychotherapy, or that older adults can't benefit from psychotherapy, that they're stuck in their ways, or that their memory challenges will prevent them from benefiting from psychotherapy. And it's just not true. It's just not, it's not true. In my own field, I do a lot of mHealth techniques or mHealth psychotherapy work with older adults. And it's been a little bit of an uphill hurdle to convince folks that older adults can learn to use the technology to participate meaningfully in mHealth modalities. And that's, sure, they're not as adept as your average 25-year-old, but plenty of older adults are incredibly interested in learning how to use the phone or the tablet if they don't already know how to use it. So just there's these little nagging stereotypes and biases that require a little extra effort to overcome.
I would say, from my own experience, I think society not recognizing that older adults are a huge resource and assets to our communities. So underutilizing, the skills that they still have and can offer. And I think a lot of times older adults will internalize those ageist views. For instance, my personal story, my father, he was maybe in his late 50s, 60s, and he wanted to, he had to stop working, take care of my grandfather, and he wanted to get back into working. And he had a lot of gray hair, but he had a lot of experience, and nobody would hire him. And I just saw how badly that made him feel. He felt like, nobody valued him, and maybe he didn't have anything else to offer. And so I feel like I see that a lot. People don't recognize how much older adults can give in terms of, to help with children, volunteering, and those kinds of things. So I think that's something that we certainly need to address. And then the internalized ageist, thinking is really damaging for older adults.
Yeah, just kind of jumping off what you said, Tracy, in terms of, that participation, right? Asking older adults to be involved. I just want to take a step back and just define ageism, right? It's a prejudice or discrimination based on a person's age. It might be obvious, maybe it's not, I'm not sure, but I just felt the need to do that. And so I think for me, my research is really about working in communities with older adults so that they can help to create age-friendly communities. And so this idea of creating policies is really important and really critical in doing that. And so one of the outcomes of my research is really the importance of involving older adults in the creation of those policies and services that can benefit them to age in place. And when we continuously dismiss, like you were saying, like you both were saying, when we continuously dismiss older adults as not really having the faculties to participate or to engage, we really miss out on the wisdom that they have to offer our communities and our policies, so that we can support them to age in place. And, you know, we're all aging in and of ourselves. Another thing that just comes to mind is just the planning and preparation that we all did for this event in and of itself, right? I mean, we were so careful to think about the imagery that we presented, so that we didn't present this image, you know, of somebody who's super fit and active versus somebody who's really impaired, and just trying to understand and convey that older adults are not a monolithic group. And, you know, it was tricky to do that because a lot of the imagery that exists is really one extreme or the other.
Yes, we did, in fact, go back and forth quite a bit on the imagery that we were trying to include in all of our promo items because of how mindful we all have been with respect to the narratives about aging that exist. And we know that media and, you know, movies and things like that are really upholding these stigmas and stereotypes really, unfortunately, well. And I am positive that for all the faculty on the line, and we actually have Dr. Myrick, who's from another school of social work, joining, and I know that he would agree that a lot of our classes begin with a few modules debunking these myths as a way to kind of prepare students to kind of, again, address these biases that may exist. And sometimes, and Dr. Davis can confirm, I think like as young as like 4th grade or something to that effect, these ageist kind of stereotypes start entering and sticking around for us through our childhood and development. And just you know, understanding that age is another category of difference, but also embracing and shedding away, again, those harmful stereotypes. I couldn't agree more with respect to what you mentioned as well, Dr. Davis, about the risk of internalization of ageism. And as a social worker and a therapist, I have seen this firsthand where folks feel very unmotivated, very shut out from society because of their age. And again, like I'm a clinical focused social worker, but it's, you know, very important to consider and zoom out and think about the macro related examples of this. And when we think about, you know, how we approach, let's say, the pandemic and schools and daycares one way with respect to the risks of COVID, but we approach long-term care facilities in a very different way. And we just sort of lock them down. Right. And we understand risks are different, but we also have to understand the harmful impacts of being isolated, of being stuck in a room with another individual that you may not know. I mean, this is just one example, but these are really actual examples that happen in real life. And when I think about the opportunities for the students on the line or tuning in, you have the agency and the drive and the passion to make these changes and to create a better aging experience for yourself, for your family, and for everyone. So it's exciting. And I wonder, you know, with respect to this discussion on ageism, if any of our attendees want to join in and mention or share any reflection or thoughts about ageism, or witnessed any instances, or just have any additional comments they want to share while we're here on this subject. So open it up to the rest of our attendees. Maybe we're all multitasking. Okay. Well, if anyone has any comments, of course, we all welcome you to drop these in the chat, and feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, and please join in on the conversation. You know, in terms of our next question, it might be a little repetitive, but I'm going to throw it out there to our panelists to see if maybe there's any additional comments or thoughts they have. Oh, thank you, Dr. Myrick. Yeah. Oh boy. So we see in the chat, thinking about different classes. Yeah, different levels of interest in different classes focused on older adults. And I think from the faculty perspective, sometimes we can see how these classes sometimes aren't the sexiest, but we're trying to change that. And that's in relation perhaps to our thoughts about aging, and hopefully today's event and the rest of the event series we have for Careers in Aging Week will help chip away at these realities that we're living with. But I want to shift to our next question. Again, maybe a little related to the last question, but for panelists, how do we think ageism impacts our society today?
So Lauren, I loved, not loved, but you had mentioned, isolation, and I'm always thinking about the World Health Organization's age-friendly cities, and they have this, I wish I had a picture of it right now, but this little flower that sort of talks about all of these elements related to age-friendly cities. And one of those things is, how communities really cater to young and able-bodied. And I feel like we can't talk about older adults without also mentioning ableism, because as we age, we get we're much more prone to chronic conditions and disability, and so there's this sort of intersectionality related to that has to be considered. And so in communities, when you think about the physical environment, there's broken sidewalks, there's crosswalk times that need to be considered that really prevent older adults from entering the physical environment. But not only the physical environment, just access to communication. You mentioned about actually, Alyssa, you mentioned about technology and being able to access certain kinds of information, and that's essential to get older adults to participate, whether it's volunteering or taking part in the community in some kind of event, those sorts of things. So coupling all of that with this ageist sort of attitude can leave older adults feeling very isolated, not only feeling isolated, but actually being isolated, which is what I was getting to, Lauren, that you mentioned. And that I think a fact that is really troubling to me is that the risks of isolation carry the same health risk as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And that is so startling. And there are really things that we all can be doing right now to address ableism and ageism so that we can start to really dismantle it and involve older adults more in our communities.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it's something that I'm always focused on in my professional role, but I'm really also trying to consider opportunities to be more civically engaged where I live in my town, exploring with, all that free time, but, some of the free time to see how does my town, what's happening in my town? And also, how can I be of service as someone who knows this, can teach this, can educate this, and I'm collaborating with a lot of different agencies on aging, in fact, just as a friend to help bring and support their team and their community members, because they're looking for this information as well. Again, another career opportunity. But I'll open it up to the rest of the panelists. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure that I really have anything to add on this one.
Yeah, Dr. Baylog may have captured it all. She really did a great job of summarizing a lot of the impacts, and again, related to our earlier question about how we see ageism impacting our fields. No, not at all. And how we're also in unique positions to kind of address and respond on a variety of different levels. And it really can also start with just considering in meetings or in other gatherings where things are mentioned and there's maybe an ageist point of language that is shared, and it's a teaching moment, right? It's a learning opportunity. We're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. One of my favorite professors from my doctorate program mentioned, like, we're not calling people out, we're calling people in, right? We're just trying to have these conversations so we can create a larger shift in the way that we speak about aging, our older community members, and also, for us all as we continue to age. So believe it or not, we are actually at our last question. I was thinking perhaps we wouldn't get there, but we are there. And I think this has been such a rich conversation. And I appreciate all the panelists for really adding in their opinions and their thoughts, and the passion is here. So this question, again, inviting all to join in here. How can students, professionals, researchers, and everyone really prepare for working with older society members in a way that is anti-oppressive and anti-ageist?
Maybe this is my own wishful thinking, but I teach a class called Mental Health and Aging at the School of Public Health. And that class is all about aging and age inclusivity and but I also recognize that it serves as a first and maybe only experience learning and thinking about older adults for my School of Public Health students. I would love to see some sort of aging core competencies integrated into all of our schools. When I was a psychology graduate student, there were just certain things that I felt like I should not be able to call myself a psychologist until I had gotten some basic competencies in dealing with psych crises. And there were basic competencies that like the APA, the American Psychological Association of America, sets forth, but I didn't feel comfortable like calling myself a psychologist until I got training in psych-ERs, training with PTSD, training with behavioral medicine. There were just these core things where I was like, how dare I? How dare, right? And part of it was because I focused early on and narrowly on working with older adults, that it wasn't until I was nearing the end of my degree that I was like, oh my God, but I'm still going to be a psychologist. I better have some general competencies too. I would love for gero competencies to be integrated into nursing, social work, occupational therapy, any health profession, any of them, just, and it doesn't have to be, you have to take a class called working with older adults, but I would love to see like the fingers of the geriatric or the gerontologists touching some of the courses that are part of the core competencies, because there is no version of your life where you will not interact meaningfully with older adults, either in your career or your personal life, or you yourself will become one. So wouldn't it be great if we had a basic understanding of how cognition changes throughout the lifespan, of how physical limitations and chronic health conditions impact older adults more than younger adults? Wouldn't it be important for almost every career trajectory to understand key things like high frequency hearing loss is common in older adults. So you don't want to just get louder, you want to get lower too when you speak with older adults, right? It's just these little tweaks that, like, if that was part of everyone's core training, then we could start to build a more inclusive, pro-aging society. But that's my Pollyanna view of the world. That will never happen.
Well, hopefully it will.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially what I was going to say. I mean, students, need to learn about aging. Like Alyssa said, there's no way that they're not going to interact with older adults, either their parents or grandparents, or in their, employment and whatnot. But I think sometimes you got to just be a little tricky and just kind of sneak the aging education in where you can. So even if it's not like a perfect fit, you can kind of shimmy something in there. I mean, I teach a couple of classes that aren't aging focused, but we learn about aging, fairly early on. And that's like the first opportunity the students have a lot of times to learn about it. Because I do survey and I'm like, well, have you learned about anything related to aging thus far? And a lot of the students are juniors and seniors and they haven't. So I take that opportunity to teach them. So I say just stick it in wherever you can. But breaking those myths and I think once you can kind of help the students understand that one day they're going to be older and how do they want to be treated, I think that's where you can really start to kind of break down some of those walls and misconceptions.
And I also think, really quick, Dr. Baylog, sorry, I also think that that question, Tracy, is not just for folks who are students in their undergrad or grad or like adolescent time of life. I think that question actually also needs to be asked continuously, because some of the barriers that we can experience as like pro-aging faculty and clinicians and practitioners is that we still seem to have some barriers, and it's not always, you know, what we're assuming, like coming from like our younger students or colleagues or whoever. It's ageism can happen across the lifespan. So yeah, just wanted to echo that. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Baylog.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, I do want to say to your point, we, and in the occupational therapy program, it is a requirement for our students to have elements of aging and learning about aging at all levels in terms of occupational therapy. But what is really fantastic about Rutgers is that we have an entire older adults course, which I'll be teaching this summer for the occupational therapy students. And even more exciting is our ability to partner with Dr. Tracy Davis to bring the certification in gerontology, right? Did I get that right, Dr. Davis? To our students as well. And anybody can take that certification. That's what's so exciting about it. So there are opportunities to really to look at classes for aging that don't necessarily have to be related specifically to your field. But also another thing I wanted to bring up is the idea of nothing about us without us, which again, Dr. Davis, I know in the HIV world, that's where that statement comes from, but it also applies to older adults, right? If we are going to be designing programming, designing interventions, having courses, whatever the case may be, we need to involve older adults. Again, we can't stand here and say they have so much to offer, and then leave them out of the development of all these fantastic programs, innovations, entrepreneurial opportunities. And I think, again, we've mentioned this many times before, but just squashing ageist attitudes, right? Allowing not only you to help maybe an older adult person to do something that can keep them independent or in their home, like maybe taking your neighbor's trash cans back or things like that, but also allowing them to help you too. Right? If they have advice or if they want to maybe provide some care or things like that, you know, recognizing that it's really reciprocal and symbiotic to have a relationship with an older person.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It is symbiotic, and it can happen and positively influence and impact a variety of different parts of oneself. So I think everything that was said just is so, you know, this is my passion. This is everyone here on the line is their passion, not only working with this part of, you know, our population, but also telling everyone else about these great opportunities and how rewarding this work is, no matter what type of work it is. It is all, I think my colleagues would agree, it's very rewarding and very mission related. So I just want to thank all the panelists and everyone for joining. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I just want to open it up now to the folks who are attending. If they have any questions, students, professionals, any questions for our panelists or anything else they wanted to share. I see a lot of thank yous in the chat. I'm so excited. One of the students, I think, from the law school is going to be working at JASA in New York City, which is a wonderful organization. They have a naturally occurring retirement community, elder law, very important. Thank you so much. Dr. Baylog posted a lot of great stuff in the chat as well, resources. So yeah, I just want to open it up to the rest of the folks joining us this afternoon. If you have any questions or comments you want to share, please go right ahead. Take yourself on mute or off mute. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Just a reminder, it's Careers in Aging Week. This is our first event, our first virtual event that we're hosting. Thank you, Matthew. And We have 2 events. We have one event tomorrow featuring professionals in aging at 3 p.m. And we also have on Thursday a event for research in aging. So any students interested in going sort of beyond their undergrad or graduate degree, interested in leading studies, interested in data collection, please join us on Thursday at 6 p.m. Virtually. I will send out our flyerage. I can try to post it in the chat. I'm so terrible at that. One of my colleagues, if you're a whiz, go ahead. Oh, here. I'll post that in the chat. The registration links are there. And again, I just want to thank Dr. Davis, Dr. Baylog, and Dr. Kozlov for joining, for sharing your insights and your comments and your experiences and your passion with us all. Thanks to all the attendees as well. I'll leave.
And thank you to you
open.
for leading such a fantastic
Thank
panel.
you.
Your questions were really wonderful and you're very engaging. So thank you.
Thank
for hosting.
you. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you all. I really appreciate you all being here, and take good care, and hope to see you tomorrow afternoon for our Professionals in Aging event for this year's Careers in Aging Week at Rutgers.
And also, Lauren, I think all of our emails are available on that flyer. So, feel free to reach out. And if you have questions about any one particular discipline or just aging in general, we can help to point you into the right direction.
Yes, please keep in touch. Please reach out. We are here to help. We are here to chat. Thank you all so, so much. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thank you. Waiting.